we have all seen this video. In fact, I follow this Aging Wheels a lot. I love his videos, watch them all the time. But how did we get here, right? How did the Coda become a thing? How did it do? And, this is essentially a video that entitles and wraps up the lore and story that is Coda. So, the Coda car, right, when the company was looking to make their own EV, remember, EVs weren't a thing back then, right? You had the GM EV1, paved the way, plowed the way. But, other than that, people hadn't really heard of this. This was brand new territory, right? Nowadays, you can buy BMSs and stuff like that really cheap. Back then, this was fresh, new ground territory, and a lot of the parts in these cars were used from other electronics that weren't even EVs, right? Remember? Paving the way. So, this car, when they were coming out with it, they had enough to work on with the EV bit and everything. They chose to use the body shell of a foreign car. The Hafei Sobao? Yeah, the Hafei Sobao, which is obviously a wonderfully beautiful and totally not ugly at all Kia Rio knockoff, right? We've all seen this Kia Rio. So, Coda had an EV range of about 88 miles, and it wasn't that bad. So, exactly why did the Coda fail? Was it because of some crash test error? It failed something, failed the crash test, they had to discontinue it or something? Well, to find out exactly what happened to Coda, we have to go back. Oh, yeah, by the way, Crash Test Archive. Love those guys. I can find crash tests for every single car I'm reviewing. It's amazing. We have to go back to the original EV wars. This is an article written in September 15th, 2010. Right now, it's actually September 16th. Yesterday, 2010, it's currently around this time. It should be out by this time. A day ago, 14 years ago, this article was written. The year the electric car becomes a reality. 2010 was essentially the battles of the EV. So let's look at our players, shall we? Let's look at the lineup. Coming in as a concept car in 2009, it's the Nissan Leaf. Okay, I'm not going to do that. That's really cringe. Anyway, the Nissan Leaf was, Nissan, big company. Nissan's always been forward-thinking with their CVT transmissions and crap like that. So they said, hey, EVs, we love it. We're going to jump in. We're going to make our own EV, and it was called the Leaf, and it is not at all related to the Sentra. Yes, I have looked that up. The next car on the list is the Wigo. I know it's very convenient that, Aging Wheels tends to own all these cars that were participants in the original EV wars. That's just how it goes, right? Wigo, there was a few others, but pretty much it was just standard Wigo. They were also a player. 2009, Mitsubishi i-MiEV, right? Remember, this came out in 2009, one of the first cars on this list, right? Remember, this was a concept car in 2009, began sale in 2010. Wigo was sold in 2012, but the Wigo Whip was for sale in 2011. The Mitsubishi i-MiEV started sale in 2009. And the other car was the 2009 Tesla Roadster. This has been out since 2006, I believe. This is, of course, based on a Lotus. So I'm sure you can already see kind of what, and remember, of course, we have the Coda. So I'm sure you can kind of see where things are going here. We have these crazy, absolutely insane, fast, weird-looking vehicles, these interesting cars. And then you have the everyday, just you can drive it, it'll take you where you need to go. Like, this is like trying to be a normal car but an EV, and let's look at the last war, right? Every 10 years or so, kind of like pandemics, epidemics, whatever, we see a new wave of something, right? Some battle happens. Remember, the car industry is brand new. We've only had this for like maybe 20 years now, so we're just starting to see these patterns. And from what I've noticed, every 10 years or so, there's a new fad, right? We had the crossover and hybrid fad. Fads go on almost, I would describe it as they overlap, right? So every year there's a new fad, and it runs for about 10 years, and then it dies off, and then a new fad takes its place. It goes from like 1995 to 2005. That was the crossover craze, 2005 and onward, and that's just kind of how it works, or that's how we've seen it work. So this was the EV craze. To find out how this plays out, why don't we go back to the last fad, the last war that we had, which is, of course, the 1999 Toyota Prius against the 1999 Honda Insight. Both these cars were alive at the exact same time. The Honda was for sale 1 year earlier than the Toyota Prius at 1997, and the Prius was for sale at 98. That was the first year it was for sale at the US. But the Prius was created in 1996, and the Insight was created in 1997. The Prius just wasn't sold here. Toyota tests all their cars out in Japan. That's why when you hear an article about Toyota releasing something in Japan, you think that's probably small beans or whatever. No, Toyota tests all their cars in Japan, their best things. They did that with Lexus for a while, keeping it secret. So Yeah, so how did this play out? You can see the similarities between these two wars, right? This is just, when someone pokes you, you turn around to look at what it is, right? This is the car company's natural, native responses, right? One car company like Honda goes, hey, this technology is weird. It's going to be a hard time, packaging it to people anyway, so we're going to make it as weird as possible. We're going to lean into the weirdness. And you have one car company that says, this is pretty normal. We're just going to go play it normal. There's, Toyota was also I didn't include Toyota in this because they were already in the last EV fad, so these were really the main players. There was also in 1998, again, the same, before the GM EV one, a Toyota RAV4 EV. So Toyota was definitely in this. They've been in this for a while, but I'm not going to include them here just for competency's sake. So exactly what do you think ended up happening with this, right? We've seen the last time something like this played out, the Prius won. The Prius was standard, the Prius was normal, and with its cute styling and slightly odd looks, it won over the Inside's general weirdness. So what do you think went here? Well, unfortunately, you may have thought, if you're, following by the example I've just given you, the Mitsubishi i-MiEV would go off to be a smashing success. Mitsubishi would be a leader in EVs. The Wigo would still be alive today, and, everyone would be driving around. They're the cool, hip, fun, new car. And Codas would be driven everywhere by every single family that just wants a family EV, taking up half the market share. That didn't happen. This EV craze, so to speak, ended up bowing the other way. It was the Nissan Leaf, the weird-looking one, and the Tesla Roadster, or Tesla as a whole. Remember, Tesla, I would usually use individual cars, but Tesla has this mentality where all their cars are designed under the same mentality, same focus, same purposes, so it's kind of Tesla as a whole. Nissan Leaf and Tesla ended up being the two. The Tesla taking the spot of the hyper, ultra, crazy performance model, and of course the Nissan Leaf being your everyday family EV. I remember when I was growing up, a few families had these 3 in all of Oregon. Not bad, So, let's talk about early sales numbers. Remember, we're still back in this timeline. How much did the Nissan Leaf sell its first year in sale? This was 2009. Nissan, they were popular, but they weren't that popular, right? This sold 17 units in 2010, or at least that's what the numbers reflect. 17 units. How many did Coda sell? They sold 100 units in 2012, which means all these players, all of them, except for maybe the Wigo, they were all on sale before the Wigo was even, before the Coda was even thought up. So that's the main issue. They were just late to the game. And also, like we said, the way this EV thing was going to play it was with weird, funky, and interesting, right? Not boring family car, especially when it's a ripoff of literally the most boring car ever. I may love boring cars. Heck, I get bored with fun cars. I love to find the goodness in bad, right? Like this car. I'm sure I can find the good in this car, but you have to admit, this is a conventionally boring car, right? That's just how it ended up playing out, right? So, technically, yes, at one point the Coda did sell more than the Nissan Leaf. Tides eventually turned, and the Nissan Leaf, this was the early days, right? The Coda came in 2 years after the initial war happened. There were already winners, and they were just kind of, punching them as they were walking out the door of the arena, right? So we all know another interesting thing here is what happens next, right? We've seen this before. Remember that previous example I gave you, the Honda Insight versus Toyota Prius? These wars don't just end 10 years down the road. This is just proving that the technology works. One of them, or multiple of them, because there were a lot of players in the EV race, a lot that I didn't mention, just because tracking down companies from 14 years ago, it ain't fun, especially when they were all concept startups, funding, ugh. Anyway, I think you will still get the main idea of the point that I'm trying to make here, right? So, Toyota and Honda Insight, 10 years down the line, the fight has already ended. This happens where they start to get better. Honda, the other car company that was wrong, starts to copy, right, what the initial car company that did the right thing does. And then this technology becomes popular. That's how we have hybrid Corollas, hybrid Camrys, hybrid, Highlanders. That's how we have those, right? Hybrid technology has just become standard, and that's what we're seeing today with all these new EV models, right? EVs had their war in 2010, and now they're having their, the technology's everywhere. It's already proven itself point right now. Like hybrids already had theirs in 2010. EVs are having it right now. EVs are where hybrids were at in 2010 when the initial war was going down. So what happened to Coda? Well. They only sold 117,000 models in 2012 and 2013. And then they went bankrupt. Believe it or not, you can't run a car company off of 137 sales. So, Mullen Technologies, after Coda Automotive filed for bankruptcy, essentially they got picked out by 3 different companies. Mullen Technologies, Ergonix, and Fortress Investment Group. Essentially, Coda said, hey, we're bankrupt. So, Mullen said, give me them Codas, and they bought all the Codas and sold them as the Mullen 700E until 2019, right? These were still sold until 2019. They just sold them. They said, give us all your stock. It'll be fine. We'll sell them as cheap and affordable. Just give us the stock. They got that. Ergonox acquired all the remaining assets of the company, so they had other cars. This is probably just machines, factories, all that crap. And then Fortress Investment Group ended up paying $25 million to bid to acquire the company. They own it now. Now Coda does autonomous driving stuff. They're still kind of around a little bit, but, this is what happened to Coda. So, Coda didn't end up being the revolutionary that it was meant to be, and, it wasn't really a failure, it's just kind of what happened. So, with that, thank you for watching, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I think this went actually very well.